Good evening and welcome to the Job Search Solution, the radio program where we talk about looking for a job, changing jobs, changing careers, hiring. And as always, we begin with a prayer. Dear God, grant us thy peace and thy mercy, thy will be done. And in just a few minutes, Rich Lavinski is going to be with us talking about consultants in the workplace. A great topic, and he really knows it well because he's been doing it since 1988 here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I wanted to spend this first portion of this evening's program talking as quickly as we can about listening. One of the biggest challenges that both candidates and employers run into in the interviewing process is listening. I just read a book called You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. And it's a great book and one that you ought to read. And she brings up the fact that people feel more isolated than they ever have before, especially since the pandemic. That Microsoft did a study and found that in the year 2000, people's attention span was went from 12 to 8 seconds from a previous study. And it said that scientists have said that the attention span of a goldfish is 7 seconds. So our attention span isn't much greater than a goldfish. We can carry on as many as 7 thoughts at one time, moving one from one to the other. We go into meetings with biases about the people that we're going to meet, especially in the interviewing situation based on the resume that we've seen or what we think of the company, both on the candidate side of things as well as the employer's side of things. The biggest challenge that people have in listening is that they are thinking about what they are going to say instead of listening to what the other person has to say. Instead of pausing and thinking about what they just heard, and I'll get to this in a second, taking good notes, they start thinking about what they're going to talk about, and halfway through what they're listening to, they start thinking about what they're going to say, and it gets in the way. At any rate, it's a very detailed book, but regarding the interviewing situation, here are some things that you have to remember. You got to make sure you understand, if you're a candidate, what the questions are that a hiring authority is giving you. Make sure you really understand the question. I can't tell you the number of times I've had candidates start answering a question before they even knew what the question was. They didn't have a clear understanding of what the question was. Because they didn't, as a candidate, want to appear ignorant, they start just answering a question thinking they know what the question is, only to find out that the interviewing authority says, no, that's not what I really asked. If you're an interviewing authority, you need to make sure that you ask very specific questions of candidates and do your best to ask every candidate the same questions and take notes. 50% of the hiring authorities that I've spoken with, as well as candidates, don't take notes. You got to take notes. You don't have to take elaborate notes. You don't have to write down everything everybody says, but you got to be able to write down what you're going to need to remember when you go out and debrief with me or with anyone else about the meeting that you had. Pause before you start answering any question, and pause after you listen to the answers of a question. If you get in the habit of doing that, you pay attention to more of what you just heard, and you understand it better. Yuri Hassani is a psychologist. I think he's at Purdue, but he's shown that when people are in sync, their brain waves are in sync. And so when you ask questions and answer questions in the right way, the person that you're speaking with reflects the same brain waves that you have. This takes practice, especially if you're a candidate. There is such a tendency to want to tell everybody everything that you've done and how you've done it and the way you've done it, that you don't realize oftentimes what the questions are. I had it happen just yesterday. I had an employer tell me that the candidate just started answering a question that he didn't know, he didn't understand the question. Yesterday also, I had a candidate uh, say that one of the reasons he was looking for a new position was because the company that he was with could not provide the resources to the consulting jobs that he was selling. The employer, instead of giving a specific answer, said, "Well, you don't have to worry about that here. We've got excellent resources." Instead of being specific about the resources that they have and giving maybe an example, she just said, "Well, we have really good resources here." He did not feel very satisfied. She didn't really hear the question ask, "What do you mean by that? Give me an example of where you didn't get the kind of resources, and then I'll give you an example of the kind of resources that we have here." Neither one of them were listening to each other because they were so concerned about what they were going to say. So, again, this takes practice. Be specific in your questioning. Pause when you question. Ask very specific questions, and you'll make it a lot easier on yourself. Take good notes so that when you walk away from the meeting, you have something that you can go by for the next meeting. All right, we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. This is Tony Bashir with the Job Search Solution.